Before the video begins, I'd like to address a personal matter. Please join my Discord, where I regularly share smaller updates throughout the day about my new videos. Thank you, and now enjoy the video. This video falls under the fair use law. The following is a fan summary, for entertainment purpose, only, which is not intended to replace the original series. We do not own the anime, manhwa, or any of the artworks, all rights reserved to their respective owners. Please support the official release of this series. This is for people's enjoyment only. This video is not meant to infringe any of the copyrights. Shin also noticed that someone was observing him using his ability and shifted his gaze towards Taeheon. Both faced each other, looking at one another, while the room was still lightly filled with dust. Shin's face was quite emotionless, while Taeheon displayed a slight expression of surprise. While Shin and Taeheon exchanged glances, Shin's gaze shifted to the battlefield, where his remaining comrades continued to fight against the two lizard men. Shin gradually counted his comrades engaged in battle, reaching the number 8 before counting himself as the 9th person and then Taeheon as the 10th person. Shin loudly remarked to Taeheon that this was strange, as he distinctly remembered there should only be 9 people in the dungeon. Taeheon was not pleased, and his expression reflected his dissatisfaction. He questioned Shin about what he was doing and why he wasn't helping the rest of the comrades who were all busy dealing with the lizard men. Even with their efforts, his comrades were struggling. One of his comrades was simultaneously pushed back by the red lizard man, losing his weapon in the process and falling to the ground, similar to what happened with the green lizard man and another comrade earlier. Another member of the group, a mage who was positioned slightly behind in the fight, noticed this and rushed to the fallen comrades. However, just like with the green lizard man before, the lizard-like monster seized the opportunity and prepared for another strike. Taeheon, who followed the battle along with Shin, noticed this and sprinted with insane speed to the scene, leaving Shin alone with his pickaxe. Shin looked down and saw the suitcase Taeheon had brought, which still contained one of his swords. As he contemplated this, Shin never thought that Taeheon, the leader of the Overkill Guild, would personally come to rescue a group from a dungeon. While inspecting the weapon in the suitcase, he also wondered why Taeheon would carry a weapon he didn't use. Simultaneously, the thought occurred to me that it could be a spare weapon. However, since Taeheon was now assisting his comrades in his place, Shin stood motionless on the edge of the battlefield, observing the situation without personally getting involved. Taeheon's sword ignited in an orange flaming aura, parrying the lizard man's attack before he could inflict serious harm on the defenseless group member. While Taeheon was busy stopping the lizard man, he called out to the comrades behind him, asking them to please move away from the combat zone. With tears in his eyes, the mage who had run to his group member's aid helped him up, thanked Taeheon, and together they made their escape. At the same time, Taeheon had also overwhelmed the lizard in the one-on-one fight, knocking the sword out of its hand. Now that he had the advantage of a weapon, he once again ignited his sword with a bit more of his orange flaming aura and effortlessly ended the fight with a single triple slash, causing the lizard man to receive substantial wounds throughout his body and then fall motionless to the ground. After winning the battle, Taeheon looked down at his blood-stained sword and noticed that, even though he had not fully utilized his strength, which was at the B rank, it was clearly too weak to withstand his power. The sword slowly disintegrated into smaller pieces after he used his triple slash. Even after defeating one of the two lizard men, Taeheon remained vigilant and immediately noticed another threat emerging before him. The other green lizard had noticed that his friend was killed, fled from the battle with the remaining group members, and rushed towards Taeheon like a madman, without much thought, seeking revenge. Upon reaching Taeheon, the lizard, driven solely by instincts and without much consideration, swung from top to bottom, attempting to crush Taeheon with a powerful blow. However, Taeheon, thanks to his abilities, effortlessly evaded the attack and repositioned himself for a counterattack a bit further away, at Shin's level. Seizing the opportunity, Shin directed his words to Taeheon, asking him, while looking at Taeheon's destroyed sword, if this would always happen when he enveloped his weapon with an ability. Furthermore, Shin added that the sword he was holding would probably be of inferior quality, still ignoring the green lizard, who was now being dealt with by the other group members who were still participating in the fight. Taeheon was not particularly pleased with the question and the way Shin posed it. He asked somewhat angrily if Shin was starting a fight with him. However, when Shin used his ability to create a weapon for Taeheon, he was astonished. Right in front of Taeheon, a weapon of the same type he was holding formed in Shin's bright blue mana in just a few seconds. Taeheon couldn't believe what he was seeing. Shin, having completed his weapon in just a few seconds, told Taeheon to please use this sword to end the fight. He added that Taeheon should not recklessly destroy the poor weapons he had brought with him. Taeheon, still in awe, wondered if Shin had just made this sword float in front of him with a simple hand motion. Taeheon also recognized that Shin was a weapon maker, not just an ordinary one, but an extremely competent and experienced one. However, as he looked at the pickaxe Shin held in his hand, he wondered why someone with Shin's talent would present himself as a mere helper. Taeheon had often heard that low-ranking supporters who didn't have much money could earn some extra income as helpers, but he couldn't believe that Shin would fall into such a category. Shin extended his hand toward the weapon still clutched in Taeheon's grasp, reminding him that the condition for wielding the weapon Shin had crafted was to forget everything about him upon exiting the dungeon. While relieved about parting with the damaged weapon, Taeheon explained that it wouldn't be easy to forget everything just because Shin wanted it. The grip of the weapon then transformed back into bright blue mana, making it impossible for Taeheon to grasp. Shin explained that if Taeheon didn't agree to his condition, he would gladly destroy the rest of his high-grade weapons in this pointless fight and wouldn't assist him any further. Taeheon sighed, considering that even Shin's weapon would be destroyed after a single attack and the use of his ability, just like the other weapons he brought into the dungeon. Nevertheless, he preferred to destroy such a weapon rather than the ones he brought into the dungeon. Accordingly, he agreed to Shin's conditions, agreeing to forget everything once they left the dungeon. Meanwhile, the remaining group members were still busy trying to stop and defeat the lizard. After Taeheon agreed to Shin's conditions, Shin smiled and released his weapon, allowing Taeheon to take it and rush directly into the battle. While the green lizard was still occupied, swinging its weapon and attacking, Taeheon stormed towards it like lightning, once again igniting his weapon with its orange fiery aura to block the lizard's attack. The block with his new sword was so strong that the lizard was visibly surprised as its weapon broke due to the recoil. Taeheon, too, was astonished by the immense stability and strength of Shin's weapon. He looked down at his own weapon and mentally reviewed the block. He had intended to merely block the attack, never expecting to shatter his opponent's weapon in the process. He realized that the control over the new weapon was far greater than usual. He wondered if the incredible strength of the weapon was inherent to the weapon itself. While Shin resumed his work and contemplated the crystal-clear candle in the background, Taeheon wondered if this weapon maker, capable of crafting such a high-ranked weapon, must be someone at least of B rank. However, there was no time to let his thoughts linger, as the lizard, despite its broken weapon, prepared to strike again. Taeheon, knowing the intentions of his opponent, managed to counter the attack in time and strike back at the lizard. He found the situation and Shin quite intriguing, wanting to see what his weapon was capable of and whether he could potentially destroy it. While his sword was embedded in the lizard's body, Taeheon once again manifested a massive aura in the sword and activated one of his abilities, causing the sword and the surroundings behind the lizard to explode, resembling a fiery dragon's breath emanating from the sword. Afterwards, Taeheon grabbed the lizard's shoulder, using it to hold on, swung behind the lizard, and resumed attacking by enveloping the sword once again in its fiery orange aura. He thrust the sword from top to bottom, igniting the lizard's body. The lizard screamed in pain and was defeated by Taeheon's final attack, falling unconscious to the ground. As the lizard lay unconscious on the ground, the first thing Taeheon did was to use Shin's sword, which can consume things, to inspect it closely and determine if it had incurred any scratches from his repeated ability usage. However, as he observed the sword carefully, he was astonished to find not a single scratch. From this, he concluded that the weapon was at least of A rank type, or even S rank. Just as he continued to ponder this, the remaining comrades ran up to him, delighted that the guild master had come personally to save them. They expressed their gratitude with cheerful smiles, relieved that they would now have one less worry and would exit the dungeon unharmed. Taeheon was also relieved that none of his subordinates had been seriously injured. While Shin continued to collect the mana stones. The other group members explained to their leader that they were able to survive the battle for so long because Shin had crafted some weapons for them. Taeheon's gaze abruptly shifted back to Shin, and he slowly approached him, asking for his name. Shin, still busy filling the backpacks, didn't even turn around but responded to the question with another question. He asked Taeheon about the significance of knowing the name of a mere helper. Taeheon explained that it was reasonable to know the name of the person one was addressing. He then introduced himself again. Upon hearing the name, Shin turned to Taeheon and introduced himself with his own name. After Shin had introduced himself to Taeheon, he spoke to the actual group leader and explained that he would deposit the mana stones he had collected at the beginning of the portal. The group leader confirmed and told him to go ahead. However, before Shin could proceed with the task, Taeheon stopped him and asked him to visit the boss room of the dungeon together. When Shin explained that he was just a helper, Taeheon took the bag from Shin, gave it to the group leader, and explained that this dungeon had transformed into an error dungeon. He also mentioned that if they couldn't defeat the boss, no one would be able to leave this dungeon. Taeheon emphasized that it didn't matter whether Shin was a helper or a supporter, he needed his assistance. Shin retorted that, as the guild leader, he was more than capable of defeating the boss on his own. However, Taeheon explained to Shin that, as seen before, no weapon could withstand the immense strength of his ability. Regardless of Shin's talent and ability to defeat the boss independently, he would stand no chance if he broke the weapon Shin had made for him during the fight. Shin was a bit taken aback and proud at this statement, while Taeheon clarified that these were just Shin's thoughts. They were still in an error-level dungeon, and here, there were far more dangerous monsters than ordinary lizards. Taeheon also explained that they should definitely be more than just cautious if the boss of this dungeon turned out to be as strong as they thought. Shin understood that Taeheon was right, relented, replaced the remaining backpacks, and set off deeper into the dungeon with Taeheon. As they progressed further into the dungeon's corridor, Shin asked if it would be enough for him to just accompany Taeheon. Deeper in the dungeon, many small cages hung from the ceiling, a few torches illuminated the room, and numerous cobwebs adorned the ceiling and the cages in the back. When Shin and Taeheon entered the dungeon boss's room, their gazes fell upon a kind of mask. Underneath the person wearing the mask, there was again a huge lizard-like monster. The boss of this dungeon was the Lizard King, classified at the seed danger level. It was the final form that a lizard man could achieve after many years of survival. Despite its small size, its speed and strength were many times greater than that of ordinary lizards. Shin looked visibly focused as he examined the opponent before him, and Taeheon provided him with information that he should better ignore the danger level and details. Taeheon, on the other hand, didn't appear too focused and looked forward to the opportunity to unleash more of his ability and end the fight as quickly as possible. He then ignited Shin's weapon and said they shouldn't be too quick, as his weapon might still break. Shin released some more of his mana and told Taeheon that he had just said that his weapon couldn't possibly break. Together, both sides were ready to face the Lizard King. But it seemed like they didn't take it very seriously. In the face of the Lizard King, Shin told Taeheon not to believe him and that he was more than willing to push his weapon and its durability to the limit. The Lizard King, having sensed the presence of Shin and Taeheon, also prepared to enter the battle, but unlike them, it was much more focused and took the matter much more seriously. The Lizard King eagerly aimed his lance at Shin and Taeheon, simultaneously commanding his lizard-like mount to charge forward and attack them. The Lizard King's mount leaped forward with massive claws directly at the spot where Shin and Taeheon stood. Fortunately, both managed to evade the attack with a nimble leap backward. Taeheon, who also dodged the assault, skillfully jumped off a wall behind him and rushed forward for a counterattack. The Lizard King's mount anticipated the counterattack and prepared to counter it with its armored tail. It successfully delivered a powerful strike against Taeheon. Thanks to Shin's sturdy sword, Taeheon managed to block this attack as well, preventing a direct hit. However, the intense recoil from the strike sent him flying back in the opposite direction. Undeterred, Taeheon seized the momentum from the recoil. Gracefully pushing off the wall again, he soared at full speed toward the Lizard King's mount. Simultaneously, the Lizard King himself initiated an attack. Charging into the midst of the battlefield. The lance of the Lizard King and Taeheon's sword clashed, and both faced each other in the midst of the battlefield. The exchanges were dignified, and after a few seconds, both had to abort their attacks, take a step back, and reposition themselves. During this pause, the Lizard King seized the opportunity, leaped onto his mount, grabbed the reins with his lizard-like hands, and ordered an attack, causing his mount to gather an enormous amount of fiery energy in its mouth. As more fiery energy accumulated in the mount's mouth, it expelled it forward in the form of a massive wall of flames. Suddenly, a mana-like wall manifested in front of Taeheon, acting as a shield to protect him from the mount's attack. The flames deflected on either side of the summoned shield, leaving Taeheon unharmed. Shin, who conjured the shield, observed the battle calmly, providing support to Taeheon from a distance. However, the Lizard King in his mount took advantage of the obscured view caused by the flames and charged forward to attack Taeheon once again. Taeheon managed to mostly fend off this attack as well, only being thrown back slightly, landing beside Shin. He questioned Shin about being a weaponsmith and how he could create a shield. Shin explained to Taeheon that a shield could indeed function as a weapon and asked if he had never been struck by one. From that moment, Taeheon was filled with renewed energy in the fight, his eyes gleamed, and the sword he received from Shin once again enveloped itself in orange, flame-like energy. He told Shin that they should put an end to this, as he had many questions he wanted answers to. He then rushed forward into the battlefield faster than ever before, aiming to conclude the fight. Meanwhile, Shin stood casually with his hands in his pockets, eager to see how the battle would unfold. As Taeheon charged toward the Lizard King, the latter took advantage of the opportunity and threw a chain-like weapon at the oncoming Taeheon. At the front of this chain was a sharp blade that could inflict serious damage. However, Taeheon effortlessly parried it, causing it to wrap around the sword he held in his hand. With a strong pull backward, the Lizard King then drew the chain, along with Taeheon attached to it, towards himself. Consequently, Taeheon, along with his weapon, was pulled directly toward the king's mount, left relatively defenseless during the entire flight and vulnerable to a counterattack. Watching this, Shin told Taeheon to stop playing so recklessly and urged him to take the fight more seriously. He extended his hand forward, activating another ability, enveloping his hand in a small blue mana shimmer. Shin once again created a sword in Taeheon's other hand, allowing him to launch a direct counterattack. Seizing the opportunity, Taeheon grabbed the newly formed sword and immediately launched a counterattack. He dispelled the old sword, causing it to dematerialize, and dispatched the Lizard King's mount with just 2 strikes. The Lizard King, witnessing how quickly and efficiently Shin and Taeheon cooperated to incapacitate his mount, was shocked at how easily he could suffer such significant damage. Seeing that the Lizard King was lost in thought and unaware of the swift turn in the battle, Taeheon seized the opportunity for another counterattack. Taking the sword with which he had just defeated the mount, he threw it toward the Lizard King. The king narrowly avoided the sword by moving his head to the side. In the meantime, Taeheon had managed to get close enough to the king and was now right in front of him. With a powerful kick to the abdominal region, Taeheon managed to inflict damage on the Lizard King, propelling him to the ground due to the recoil. However, Taeheon didn't want to give the Lizard King time to recover and rejoin the fight earnestly. He promptly leaped into the air to initiate another attack. While in mid-air, Shin once again created a sword for Taeheon, which he caught, enveloping it in an orange-golden light with his ability. Helpless, the Lizard King could only watch. After executing his attack, the king barely managed to dodge to the side, losing his left arm in the process and sustaining serious damage. Seizing this moment to assess the battlefield, the Lizard King saw Shin standing casually in the middle of the room, taking hold of his weapon's hilt without much thought, and charging towards him to attack. However, Shin, utilizing his ability, shielded himself by creating several smaller shields with his mana. While questioning the meaning behind this attack, Shin allowed his mana to flow freely from his body, creating a terrifying aura around him that crushed any combat desire within the Lizard King. While Shin intimidated the Lizard King from the front with his fearsome aura and absolute defense, Taeheon approached from behind with an equally fearsome aura, exerting immense pressure on him as well. In the eyes of the Lizard King, one could see that he realized his end had come, and there was no escape for him. While Shin and Taeheon dealt with the Lizard King, outside the red portal, a group of reporters and curious civilians were waiting for the dungeon's color to change back to blue, indicating the team's safe exit. This happened shortly, and the portal gradually returned to its normal blue hue. The first change excited everyone, and soon the entire portal was back to its regular blue color. Just a few minutes later, the group led by Taeheon emerged from the portal. Taeheon was immediately surrounded by reporters bombarding him with questions. Journalists sought details about the dungeon's interior, the monsters inside, and the condition of the group members. Taeheon was protected by 2 agents from the Awakeners Association, keeping the reporters at a distance. Min Hee-soo, the handsome young man, inquired if Taeheon was injured. Taeheon assured his 2 friends that he was unharmed and without major injuries. Other members of his guild who had participated in the group thanked their guild master again for personally coming to their aid. While Taeheon conversed with his guild members, Shin seized the moment, out of the spotlight, to distribute the dungeon loot to the appropriate places and disappear. Before leaving, he took one last look at Taeheon and then vanished into the crowd. After Shin's disappearance and the conclusion of his conversation with the guild members, Taeheon was once again questioned by reporters. They wanted to know how it was possible to complete the dungeon so quickly and if it was because this dungeon was too easy for him. Taeheon wanted to clarify that the quick completion of the dungeon was not due to it being too easy for him but attributed the success to the effective collaboration with Shin. However, when he turned around to include Shin in the interview, Taeheon realized that Shin had already departed and was no longer in the immediate vicinity. Meanwhile, the other members of the group were also being interviewed. The reporters framed their questions in a way that implied the only possible answer was that the swift victory was solely thanks to Taeheon. The other guild members affirmed this and explained that their equipment was destroyed during the dungeon. They emphasized how perilous it had been to fight against terrible monsters with damaged gear, and they had only managed it because Taeheon had helped them. Observing the conversation between his guild members and the reporters, Taeheon shook them by the shoulders and questioned why they were spreading such falsehoods. He wanted them to report instead on the person who had crafted such outstanding weapons for them and with whom they had survived for so long. However, the guild members did not know whom Taeheon was referring to. Even when he provided more details and explained that it was the helper who crafted the weapons, the other guild members still couldn't recall Shin. All they could remember was having a helper who entered the dungeon with them and diligently mined crystal ores. The fact that this helper had the ability to craft weapons didn't seem to register with them. Even after the third inquiry, the entire group's response remained unchanged. They found it odd that the helper who entered the dungeon with Taeheon initially had no pickaxe but later used one. The fully packed backpacks that Shin had properly left behind were just there. Taeheon continued to ponder why all the guild members, equipped with weapons by Shin in the dungeon, could easily forget him. He recalled how he himself received Shin's katana and agreed to the conditions. Forgetting everything about his ability after successfully completing the dungeon and exiting it, Taeheon suddenly thought that this might be a skill called rental pay, responsible for the contract with Shin. At the same time, he found it strange that a mere helper could wield such a powerful ability, usually limited to individuals of at least A rank or higher. While immersed in these thoughts, Taeheon was approached by his 2 friends, curious about what was occupying his mind. To catch up with Shin, Taeheon tossed the case containing his weapon to his friend, who caught it and hurried to reach Shin as quickly as possible to talk to him. In doing so, he left his two friends amidst the reporters. Min Hee-soo and the handsome man still had no idea what was going on with Taeheon and simply watched as he ran hastily. Taeheon scanned the surrounding area, searching for Shin, but no matter where he looked, he couldn't find him. Just as Taeheon had given up and paused to catch his breath, Shin was only a few meters away, behind a stone wall, calmly staying hidden. Taeheon had no idea that the person he sought was just a few meters away. He stood at the end of the park, contemplating the possibilities that could arise with Shin and his ability. The beautiful garden landscape shimmered in golden hues against the setting sun behind him. It didn't take long for Min Hee-soo and the handsome man to catch up with Taeheon, asking him why he was in such a hurry. Taeheon turned to his secretary, Min Hee-soo, and informed her that he had a task and that she needed to find a specific person. Meanwhile, Shin continued on his way calmly, hoping that Taeheon wouldn't find him any time soon.